What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Reebok Nanoflex 2.0. All right, so these shoes have been out for quite some time now, and I've gotten around to picking them up maybe a few months ago and just kind of been testing them on and off as I've been testing other shoes. So this review is a little delayed, but I mean, better late than never. I actually found that these were better than the previous year's Nanoflex, which I also tried, but I never got around to reviewing. They were okay. I didn't really like them. I thought some of the other budget options out there were better, so I gravitated a little bit more towards those, but they weren't bad shoes at all. This time we have more of a close competitor to what I thought was the best budget shoe from before, which was the Nike MC trainer. This one is actually, I would say, on par with that shoe. And we're talking about shoes that are about $90, maybe even a little bit cheaper than that. I know the MC trainer is actually cheaper than that. This guy comes in at $90. I'd say anything under $100 is kind of like an entry-level shoe. But without further ado, let's just kind of talk about the Nanoflex TR, and I also have the Nanoflex Adventure, which is the same basic shoe. Some of the material is a little bit different, and I'll highlight that in the construction part of this video. So the construction of the Nanoflex 2.0 is made to look like it is kind of like the little brother of the Nano 12. But there are some key differences. The materials obviously aren't going to be as nice and not going to be as premium. The just toe box material up to the vamp is just the standard kind of mesh material. Even though it's made to look like the older style of flex weave, it's not. It's just a normal mesh. And there's nothing wrong with that. It bends, it moves, it's comfortable, it's flexible, and it's breathable as well. On top of that, you have an overlay on the metatarsals. You do have one on the medial side of the toe bumper, and it doesn't go around the toe, which is kind of odd, but I guess you don't really need it, to be honest with you. And then you have some vector overlays, and you have kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like a softer kind of feltish overlay, and that is the middle part of the shoe. Now, my issue with that is that it kind of is already getting torn up, and I only did like 2 rope climbs in these shoes just to try them out. And while I think that they are decent enough for rope climbs, I don't think that that part in the medial side is gonna hold up that great. The actual mesh though seems to be doing okay. The Rope Pro on these, and we'll just talk about rope climbs going forward, is actually not too bad on these. It raises up in the medial side of the shoe. It doesn't go up super duper high. There's still a pretty good amount of exposed midsole, but I honestly think that that lip right there is all you're gonna need to catch the rope and do rope climbs. It should hold up just fine. This inner part, like I said, might be the only issue when it comes to like long-term durability. And that's assuming people that buy these shoes are gonna be doing a ton of rope climbs in the first place. Anyways, going back to the midsole of the shoe, it is a standard just kind of EVA foam. No float right in this one, nothing too fancy or crazy, but that's fine. It's responsive, it's got a good enough amount of cushion. It provides pretty good impact absorption, and I thought overall, I mean, for just a basic midsole foam, it does just fine. You can lift with it, you can run with it, and I think these shoes are pretty durable because of that. The heel clip on these shoes is a TPU type material, and it's a little bit softer than like the flagship Nano 12, or I mean, pretty much all the Nanos, but it does its job. It stabilizes the heel, it gives you a little bit more lateral stability at the heel. Now, coming back to the back of the shoe, you do not get any kind of like heel clip for handstand push-ups, but once again, we're talking about an entry-level shoe. I don't think that people that are looking at buying these are really doing volume handstand push-ups, and to be honest with you, the clip for handstand push-ups never really does it for me in the first place. The tongue on this shoe is a standard kind of padded tongue. It's made out of a mesh material, it's ventilated, and I think it's pretty comfortable overall. The sides though are not gusseted, so it does move around a little bit. The laces on the shoe, just kind of a basic lace, nothing special there, but they stay tied, pretty good. The insole is an Ortholite insole, and that's pretty good for a budget shoe, but it's glued in there, so I'm not gonna pull it out. It does provide immediate comfort when you're putting your foot into the shoe, and I thought overall the shoe was like generally pretty comfortable. The outsole is made to kind of look like the Nano 12 as well. It has a similar kind of lug pattern, and then it does have meta split grooves at the metatarsals. And I thought, I mean, even though it's a kind of a knockdown shoe, the grip on these shoes did just fine. The toe spring is something that I do not care for. It's not necessarily the toe spring, it's the way that the toe feels. It feels like there's not enough like cushion at the very front of the shoe. Like there's almost like non-existent cushioning at the very toe part. So it's kind of hard to get a grasp with the ground with your toes while still maintaining like full foot contact. I mean, pushing down on your toes and still being able to push down on your heels. I don't have the actual drop on this shoe, but I would wager it's 7 or 8 millimeters, probably not any higher than that. These shoes do weigh in pretty light, 326 grams for a men's size 10. So real quick, let's talk about the Nanoflex Adventures, which are basically the same shoe, slightly different materials. And these are made to look like, obviously, the Nano 12 Adventures. So there's a little bit of armor, and it's not as tough as the Nano 12 Adventures, but it's, like I said, it's made to look like it. So the toe cap kind of has these little, I don't know, ovals on them to give it a more like rugged look. And I'm not sure you're gonna need that for anything other than like some maybe toe protection if you're like running your foot into some rocks or something. The upper is now a more taut and less flexible ripstop type material. And then you still have kind of like that same felt material on the Vector part or the mid part of the Vector logo. The other part of the Vector is just like PU overlay. And then these ones have rope lacing, which are actually, they look a lot nicer than the standard Nanoflex. The tongue on these guys is a little bit more thin. And then that's pretty much it for the differences in the upper of the, there's these character lines that are kind of stitched into the side, which, I mean, they really don't do anything different than the standard one. I guess the eye stays are stitched in a little bit beefier than the normal Nanoflex, but I mean, it's not a huge difference. And I don't think there's a huge difference in price too. I think they're the same price as the normal Nanoflex DRs. These ones are a little bit heavier at 349 grams. So do take that into consideration when buying these shoes. It's honestly, it's not a huge difference when you're thinking about training, but it is different. Now, what I will say that overall, even though the actual shoe is basically the same thing, the Adventures feel noticeably more stiff, and it's not just the upper, the outsole, the midsole, and everything. That also feels a little bit more stiff on the Nanoflex Adventures. Okay, so when you go to size these shoes, I'm gonna say they fit generally true to size. If you are sizing them compared to Reebok, just go with your standard Reebok size. If you size down for the Nano 12 or Nano 11, then I would recommend that you size back up and just get your normal Reebok size. If you're coming from like a Nike shoe, typically people are sizing Nike shoes up. I have been doing the same. So I would recommend going a half size down to the Nanoflex. So these fit pretty wide in the toe box. There's really no arch or anything, though I will say that you kind of do feel the middle part of the TPU clip kind of pressing up against the medial side of your foot, which could be a problem if you have flat feet. It goes away after a little bit of wear. Another problem area that I noticed on the just normal Nanoflex was on the outside or the lateral side of the metatarsals. My pinky toe joint would run into this side overlay. With a little bit of break-in, it went away, and they became more comfortable over time. I don't necessarily have really wide feet in general. I do have bunions on my right foot, which make it so that my metatarsals are a little bit bigger, and that's probably where that pressure comes from. But I think overall, if you don't have that issue, you should be pretty good in sizing the Nanoflex. I don't really think anybody's gonna need to go half size up unless, of course, you had just a really, really wide foot. Then I'd say that's probably a safe bet. So when it comes to running performance, I thought these shoes did pretty good. Actually, probably a little bit better than the more stiff and stable Nano 12. Even though the cushioning on these is nothing to write home about, it's just a standard cushioning. They're pretty flexible and they're a little bit softer than the normal Nano 12. They are also right about the same weight, so that you're not really getting any advantages going with the Nano 12 in that respect. The midfoot of the shoe is where you're really gonna notice the flexibility. The midfoot of the Nano 12 is just a little bit more stiff and it makes it a better lifting shoe, but I mean, depending on how you run, it can be a little bit jarring if you're a heel striker. For these shoes, I felt like any kind of gait that you have, forefoot strike, midfoot strike, heel striker, you should be pretty good and comfortable running in the Nanoflex. And that's also taking into consideration that you're just doing runs that you would find on a typical training day and not actual like distance runs or anything like that. So I would stay probably around a mile, maybe 2 miles max in these shoes. Wouldn't be doing a whole lot of running in them. They would not be my first choice, but they are definitely comfortable. And I actually think that they're a little bit more comfortable to run in than the standard Nano 12. When it came to plyometric movements, I thought they were also good as well. They're obviously not as responsive as the Nano 12 is gonna be. The float ride on those is just a little bit more sharp feeling than the Nanoflex. But I will say that these shoes are still pretty comfortable. I mean, for me personally, when it comes to doing a lot of burpees or a lot of box jumps, I thought that these did just fine. The Adventures, however, are noticeably more stiff. So if you are somebody that's looking to get a shoe to do body weight movements, plyometric movements, and you're not lifting a whole lot of weights or anything, then I would stick to the Nanoflex 2.0 and not the Adventures, because those ones are, while better for lifting, are just not as good for your plyometrics, your body weight movements, your agility and speed work. Okay, so when it comes to lifting, I actually thought that these did fairly well. I mean, I would not recommend these for anybody that is lifting super heavy, but at the same time, I'm not expecting anybody that's shopping for this kind of shoe to be pushing like maximal loads all the time. If you're looking at a WOD shoe, these are gonna do just fine. They handle medium weights surprisingly well. The Nanoflex Adventure is definitely the more stable shoe, and that's due to in part the upper is a little bit less flexible. The actual just like chassis of the shoe, it just feels more stiff and stable than the normal Nanoflex, but I thought both of them did surprisingly well when it came to lifting. I didn't max out in any of these shoes. I didn't even push super heavy weights. I didn't bother because that's really not the purpose of these shoes. These are entry-level shoes that, you know, people that like to do training or want to start training in are probably going to be shopping for, and they're going to pick up. And for those people, I think that these are going to be plenty stable. If you have issues with mobility, the drop is probably going to help you out. The one thing that I did not really care for with these shoes is that, like I said before, is the midsole cushioning kind of just drops off at the very toe of the shoe. So if you're really looking to grasp the floor with your toes, it kind of rocks you forward and kind of does the Nano 11 thing to you. But I think, like I said, for the majority of people that are picking these shoes up, it's not really going to be that big of a deal. I'd say that's probably going to hamper your Olympic weightlifting movements, but once again, the people shopping for these probably aren't going to go super heavy or might not even do Olympic weightlifting movements at all. All right, so the biggest drop with these shoes is the price. These come in at a retail price of $90 both ways, but right now you can actually get these for $55. So for that price, these are easily going to be the best entry-level shoe. So if you're somebody that's looking to get into training, you might not be pushing a ton of weight. Maybe you just needed a shoe to hit the normal Globo gym in. These are gonna be really good, excellent for, I'd say, 75% of the people looking at training shoes. If you're somebody that's a pretty seasoned vet in CrossFit, these actually also might be a good choice. They're more comfortable. You probably have developed the body control and body awareness to not really need a ton of stability, and you might just want a more comfortable shoe to train in. And for that, I think these would also be a great choice. So the person I would probably recommend stay away from these shoes is the person that is kind of like your mid-level athlete and only wants to buy a single pair of shoes. For that person, I don't think that these are gonna check off all the boxes. They're not the most stable. They could be a little bit more comfortable. The durability might not be the greatest over time, but I guess you could buy another one if it goes bad pretty soon. But otherwise, I think almost anybody that's looking to buy these shoes from entry level to even the most extreme athletes should find that for the price, these are gonna do everything that they would expect them to do. Once again, they're only $55. You cannot really expect them to be the best CrossFit or training shoe, but at the price, they shouldn't be. So if you guys have any questions about the Nanoflex 2, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.